Good night. Good night. Good night. I hope it's a good night wherever you are now. For some of you, it could be morning. For some of you, it could be evening. But for me here in Toronto, it's the early evening. It's just 8 o'clock here. Hope everyone is okay on this beautiful day here in Toronto. Hi, Queen. Hi, Love More. Glad to see you in there. Of course, as we start moving in, we ask people to share with their friends, get comfy. We are listening to the sounds of Calabash. What great music. I always love to listen to Calabash. Those of you who know me, it's one of my favorite bands here based in Toronto, playing a little Caribbean jazz, led by Anthony Pierre. You know, I'm going to bring them on one day. I keep saying that, but I got to keep up that promise. So grab yourself a nice drink. It's a nice, sunset happening out here, but still get a candle, set the atmosphere, grab a warm throw, a cushion, get comfy because it's going to be good tonight. Now, for sure, you need a notepad, something to write on, because the wisdom keys that are going to drop tonight, my people, you're going to want to be prepared. So, I'm not going to waste any more time. Welcome to Victory Speaks. It's an inspired conversation series where iron sharpens iron, and that's you and me sharpening each other. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I am Nicole Waldron, your voice of victory and your mental fitness coach. And I'm on a mission to inspire you to live a life of victory, a victorious lifestyle. You see, I really believe we all need to cultivate that victory mindset as we mind our minds. And all these conversations we're having, we need to share, we need to come together, we need to enhance each other. And it's Wellness Wednesdays. And the conversation on Wellness Wednesdays is all about our mind, body, soul, and spirit. But today, it's about minding our mind. We're continuing the series on minding our mind. And we can't take care of mental health and being alone. We need to have a village. We need to learn. We need to educate ourselves. So, how have you, my friends, and my new friends and family, how have you been minding your mind? Have you ever wondered how your brain health works? Have you ever wondered even how your brain works, how it's connected to your mental health? Our behavior and moods are determined by so many factors. But our brain, that engine, that machine, it always fascinated me. So tonight, I am really stoked. You might hear me extra hyper tonight because of the conversation. This conversation is significant. Now, and one of the reasons why is because we have to make ourselves a priority. So I'm making you another priority in my life today. It was an interesting day. Let's be real. It was like 2 seasons in the day. I may say 3 seasons in the day. It started off winter, but we think we're in spring. And then when in Toronto, at least, if you woke up late, you missed it, but it was a winter wonderland. And then it became spring again. It's like nothing ever happened. What did you see out of this whole experience today? 2 seasons, 3 seasons in one day. So as I reflect on spring, it's a new life. It's a new time of life. It's a time where nature is just coming back, and we saw the snow just coming off the leaves and the trees and the bulbs that were just there. The birds are out singing. The birds are on the balconies. The birds are running in the yards, and they're just enjoying life. This morning, they weren't there, but this evening, I saw them show up. So how are you showing up in your life? Spring is a time of refreshing and new growth. So tonight, I really hope that you will join me on this new growth and think of tonight as spring cleaning, the spring cleaning you can do for yourself today. So let's get started. And I'm so glad that you are here to be part of this conversation. Did you know that in any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness? My guest tonight is Dr. Krissy Thomas, neuroscientist and professor. And she is joining me for this very timely conversation. She is a medical neuroscientist and professor. Her research uses brain imaging to better understand neurological disorders, as well as explore the effectiveness of treatment in this population. Krissy teaches into Ontario's first graduate certificate programs in brain disorder management and mental health and disability management at Mohawk College. She also holds an assistant clinical professor adjunct appointment in rehabilitation sciences at McMaster University. She is passionate about helping people understand how the brain works so they can maximize their potential. She has received several prestigious fellowships for her research, including fellowships from the Canadian Institute for Health and Research and the Networks of Centers of Excellence of Canada. She was also featured in CBC's Her Story in Black as one of Canada's top 150 women who have made a place in Canadian history for her excellence within her field. People, folks, get your emojis ready, get your hearts ready, because tonight I want you to help me welcome Dr. Krissy to the Victory Speaks stage. Woo!
Thank you so much for having me here with you this evening. I'm excited.
I'm super excited. Can you tell I'm just like all over the place? I am just excited. Welcome, everyone. And for those I can see saying hi, now if you're on YouTube, you can still say hi. It will show up in our comments. Let us know that you are here. I see Joan Pierre here. I see Hasna here. I see Phyllis here. I see the great June Doyle is here in the house. Wendy Jones, Maureen Francis Lovemore. We are so excited that you are joining us tonight. So, Dr. Krissy, how are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you so much for having me, Nicole. I think I couldn't contain my excitement today. I was just waiting for the clock to arrive.
Oh my God, it's been a whirlwind of a week. How has your week been? How are you dealing with, we're in another lockdown. How are you handling that?
I know. You know what? I have just been trying to do the things that kind of bring, balance to my life, taking time for myself, having those quiet moments where I'm like connecting with, a good show or a good book, something like that, hanging out with my kids. You just have to kind of distract yourself from the chaos that's happening out in the world right now, especially in Ontario. Like the COVID numbers are through the roof. So it's like we have to figure out what else we can do with our time to really kind of not let it all fall apart, right? So just finding those good moments to connect with myself and my family, eat well, get a little active when you can, that kind of thing. That's how I'm passing my time.
So what are you guys doing for fun over there in the Thomas household?
Well, we're stuck on Netflix, really. It's anything that gets my oldest son, who's 13 this year, anything that gets him out of his bedroom to spend time with me, I try. So I look for movies that are interesting, things that I thought was pretty cool when I was growing up. I'm trying to get him out of his room to watch TV with me. My 6-year-old is a lot more willing, but it's like, come on, let's do something else. We had an Uno tournament last night or the night before. That was another way of trying to drive him out of his room. So, anything and anything to spend time with the family so that we kind of make sure that we're connected. We know how each other's feeling and we're at least taking care of each other in the house.
So how are you getting through the challenges with work and them doing homes? Because your son is obviously doing homeschooling. Is he homeschooling or is he going to school?
Right. Both boys have been home for the entire academic year.
Wow.
And I have been, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge because I'm also still teaching full time. So having to kind of support my youngest more so than my oldest, having to support my 6-year-old, he's in grade 1 this year, to, adjusting to technology and also adjusting to this new non-play based way of learning. At the same time as prepping my lectures and doing meetings and marking papers, it's a little challenging. And you're home, so now you're cooking and you're running the house. It's been a lot, but I mean, it's the new normal. It's been more than a year, so I think I've caught my groove. But I'm looking forward to summer.
Yeah, I know. Well, we kind of had summer today after winter. I'm just saying. What I love about this, even right now, is you have come to the table here with such joy, with such laughter. How are you maintaining this joy, Krissy? Like, you're just like, it's not even fake joy. You're just like totally bubbly.
You know, it's not easy. It's something that I intentionally do. You know, this time being home, not seeing your family as much as you wanted to, not hanging out with friends as you typically would. It's been really difficult. And I think what I've been trying to do is, one, exercising, well, as much as I can. I also broke my knee a year ago, so rehabbing that during COVID has been very challenging, but keeping active is a really important part of my life. Also trying to eat well, also spending time with friends and families over Zoom, you know, when we could have met with one other family, you know, have them sit on your couch, have a conversation, kind of debrief about life. Those kinds of connections are really important. You know, we have our family Zoom call every Sunday evening, and it's all laughs, especially with my youngest niece, not my second youngest niece. She's 4, and she is Madam Chair of the Zoom call. So that brings us a lot of laughter on Sunday. So I think just finding ways that we can still connect with loved ones and friends, finding ways to make sure there's balance by eating well, exercising, doing things that you find fulfilling is how I've been trying to, you know, keep a little bit level-headed when things seem chaotic. Nicole, you're on mute.
Thank God you told me I'm on mute. I muted myself and I didn't even know I muted myself accidentally. So who inspires you to live this life of vibrancy that you do?
Well, I think a lot of people, and also life itself. I've had some times in my life where, you know, just looking at the news, and even within this past year, looking at the news, looking at what's happening, you know, finding, just reading stuff, that kind of thing, you get discouraged and you feel like, how can we find meaning in all of this? How can we really bring ourselves back to a productive space where we can make sure that we are still contributing at the best that we can, bringing ourselves to the table every single day in the best way that we can? So I think that is just more of a deliberate decision that you've got to find a way to be resilient during this really difficult time in our world and in our lives, right? And other than that, finding kind of inspiration in your family, in your friends, you know, knowing that I need to stay on top of things for my kids, making sure that we're all living through a pandemic, right? So making sure that my kids are seeing my joy so that they aren't robbed of their own. Or if they're feeling down, they feel like, you know, I can go to mommy and talk to her about it. I think that's a huge piece of inspiration for me, just making sure that I'm connected for my kids. And then also being there for my family, right? And we all have our ups and downs during this time of lockdown. So making sure that we are there for each other when we need to be. So it's finding inspiration in the small things. And it's the people connection that's important. And just making sure that you show up as best as you could, whether it looks like a 10 on one day and a 4 on the next. Just show up to the best that you can, and it will be okay, because there'll be people around you to kind of support you through that.
I love how you mentioned the kids and, like, you know, how you're showing up for your kids. You know, just thinking about it, what would you say to parents out there that are trying to do the balancing act of kids and life? And because I feel sometimes we as adults, and I don't know if you feel the same way, that we sometimes can project how we feel onto our kids and create the anxiety or the negativity. You know,
Right.
how can we as parents manage that?
I think everyone has to do it in the way that works best for their family dynamic. I think for me, how I have faced that is that I know what anxiety and worry feels like, what it looks like. I've experienced it myself. I've studied it long enough to understand what that is. And I look for those kinds of things within my kids and my family members. I look for the facial, you know, expressions. I look for if we are being edgy and snappy. I look if we're kind of trying to isolate ourselves, if those kinds of things. You look for those cues, and then you connect. You leave space for a conversation. You leave space to say, what's up? How are you doing today? Like, is there something you want to talk about, right? Like, what's happening with your best friend so-and-so? What's happening on that video game platform?
Right.
Like, you know, you ask the questions that will potentially probe them to begin talking, and then you provide that space for them just to be. And sometimes my son says things to me that could blow my mind, that I'm like, if I ever told my mama that growing up, it would be a different situation. But I just have to leave space for him to just speak. and then just let that be out. Let him have that moment to release, and then we'll catch up on however we need to face that on the other end, right? But I think talking is important. Allowing an opportunity for folks to talk, and allowing an opportunity to connect with those feelings, I think it's a necessity.
You see, you said about leaving the space, and you see me pull back because I was giving the space. It was almost like that physical giving the space. But so many times we don't know as
Mhm.
parents, and especially if you, I don't, no matter where you grew up,
Mhm.
especially the older generation, we don't know how to do this giving space thing. Like they say something that we don't like, and we're like, we're in there, or we're talking to not hear, but we're talking to talk and not to listen. How do we leave space? What does that really mean? Giving our children space, and even giving our friends,
Yeah.
or even our partners space.
Right, right. So how I do it is ask a question, and regardless of what answer comes back to me, whether I like it or not, I say, okay, why do you feel that way? Like,
Mm,
why do you look at things that way, right? And then, without telling them, no, you don't look at it that way, this is how you should do it, I would say something, well, when I felt that way, this is
mm.
how I saw it. How do you think about that? Like, from how you feel, I can tell you how I felt in that moment. Basically, not shutting down their ability to think on their own, to explore their own feelings, or to tell them how to feel, but also interjecting your own, almost as a guiding principle from where, potentially how you could resolve these feelings that you're having without saying you're going to do this, right?
Right.
So I feel like when someone feels respected, especially in my experience, and everybody's is different, but when someone feels respected in a conversation, that you're not cutting them down, you're not dismissing them, they are more open to coming to you with issues in that moment and after that moment. You're leaving a communication bridge open, that the conversation can continue and that relationship can grow in that way. And it's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. Sometimes you feel like just telling them what to do. But it's a learning, especially at least for my boys, it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity for them to deal with their own feelings, with their own emotions, and figure it out with my gentle guidance, until I have to get pushy, but my gentle guidance along the way. And they come around, they come to it on their own, probably 99.99% of the times, right?
I really love that. Giving them the space, listening, and not always being rushing to give advice, thinking
Right.
about it, you know. I think as parents, and as and even if you have a partner, it's sometimes you may need to go take that little. It's free. Lots of stuff is free right now on YouTube. I think YouTube is like the university of the world. I don't know what it is. That you can just do a communication course on how to listen, how to communicate, because that is a skill. Because sometimes you just want to jump right in there. And I'm just loving some of the comments coming in there. And of course, Madam June Doyle, do not dismiss their feelings. I love it.
Yeah.
And great advice, Doc. Yes, you see, the advice is coming in right away. So this is why I say to everybody, live and on the replay, share, 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 because in this season, as we're going through this, no matter what season of life, but in particularly right now, we
Mhm.
need to equip ourselves. We need to educate ourselves so that we can show up as in our best selves, and every day is going to be different. So now, Krissy, you have gone into neuroscience. So before we get into more of the nitty gritty, what is, I love neuroscience. I wish I had the brain power you have, but what is
We all
neuroscience,
do.
and
We
why?
all
Yeah, I know. And
power.
why did you get into it?
Well, you know what? As you said, the brain is so fascinating. To me, I think having an organ that completely just controls our actions, our thoughts, our feelings, it houses our memories, it controls conscious and unconscious processes in our bodies. That is just something that blows my mind. It really makes us uniquely human in the way that this brain that weighs only 3 pounds. That's as much as, a 2-slice toaster in your kitchen, right? It weighs 3 pounds, is what's controlling everything about who we are, how we experience the world, how we love, how we laugh, how we just cope with things, right? And that has always been fascinating to me. Understanding that, this thing that is what, less than 2% of our body mass is actually creating my existence. It puts me at awe. And for me, that was very intriguing. I think at the onset, it was understanding how this organ brings about different kinds of disabilities, particularly when in my childhood, it was about an illness of my sister, right? She was born prematurely. She was deprived oxygen at birth. And that kind of led to a lot of developmental delays in her life. And it was seeing how my family had to cope through that really kind of ignited what's happening in the brain. Like how do we understand this in a way that would help my family for the next steps, right? And then as I continued studying, I was like, okay, if I can help my family with this information, there must be other families that are also asking questions for their own loved ones and how they navigate through sicknesses, mental, brain-based disorders, how they navigate through that to find the right solutions. Because if we're not addressing the problem, especially with brain disorders, we're just treating symptoms and our success will be limited. So we really have to understand what that underlying challenge is in the brain in order to bring about the right treatment, the right solutions for that individual. So that's what really got me involved in the brain at the beginning. It was just my fascination with it and my deep desire to find answers for my family and for families like mine to just kind of help the process of healing, right?
I see. Everybody's like fascinated. The brain only weighs 3 pounds. Yes, the brain only weighs. It's the master. Listen, the brain. Like, okay, so before we get deeper, just so people can get an understanding, I'm so excited. Can you just give people a little snapshot of, the frontal lobe, that kind of stuff, how that works and what's responsible for what? The thinking, the emotions, all that kind of stuff.
Of course, we can definitely do that. Now, let me add, not only does the brain weigh 3 pounds, but there is 100 billion with a B brain cells in that 3-pound organ. Just imagine this little thing, and there is so much power in it. It is just the most phenomenal thing to understand that, these little wires, these little brain cells that are there are connected in such sophisticated and complex ways to make you who you are. And it's only 3 pounds. It's less than 2% of your body mass, of your body weight. It's phenomenal. So in all, we have 4 lobes, right? We have our frontal lobe, which is the front of the brain. And it really is where we do the most sophisticated work. It's where we problem solve. It's where we think about directions, how we make decisions. It's where we kind of figure out how to navigate conversations, right? What is the most respectful way? How to assert yourself, those kinds of things. That's where what your frontal lobe does. It's where we think. It's what's uniquely human. Animals don't have that capacity to the same way that we do. So that's really where being human makes us the top honcho in that food chain, right? And then we have the parietal lobe that's behind that. That's really what gives us our sense of space. It's where our sensory information feeds up to, and it tells us, it integrates what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste. It keeps us connected to the world, right? So that's where we sense things, and then it goes to the frontal lobe, say, now what are we going to do about it, right? Right. Our temporal lobe is where a lot of our emotions are processed. A lot of our emotions, things that keep below the temporal lobe is where it keeps our body functionings going, whether it's digestion, whether it's, triggering us when we're hungry, all those kinds of things. It's those kinds of life functioning that keeps it going and connects it to emotion, because emotions are motivating. Right? So the temporal lobe kind of takes care of that. And then at the back, we have the occipital lobe, is where we see things. That's where our visual cortex is quite developed. So we just have, we see, of course, it's a process, how it builds up the visual image in our brain. So a lot of space is given to how we see. And then beneath all of that, that's just the cortex. I tell you, 100 billion cells, right? That's just the outer layer of the brain. Within that, we have such sophisticated circuitry that it really is phenomenal when we think about how we exist in this world and just bring to reality all the things that we perceive.
Wow. See? Are you guys happy? Are you guys fascinated? Show us your heart. Show us your thumbs up. Let us know what you're thinking. You're just getting a little tip of the brain. Okay. So how does the mind and brain work?
So it's interesting that we've even separated the two
That's
because
what I don't get, Krissy. That's what I don't get. Okay. Okay. I'm going to shut up. Okay.
no, and it's an excellent question because we shouldn't separate the two. Like our mind is a manifestation of our brain. Every single thought that we have, every single emotion that we have, it's because of neurons working together somewhere in the brain in a network to make a thought occur, or to make or trigger an emotion, or to feel a feeling. It's your brain working. So your brain and your mind are the same thing. And I think for a long time, because we have thought of it as two separate things, we have begun to create almost like a fear of our mind, especially when we get into mental illness and mental health, because we don't understand how someone can't be right in the mind, right?
Come on now.
Or something like that. But the mind is the brain. So we have to know that this is anchored in very physical processes that take place in this very physical organ that makes it easier to heal and to fix, right? When we come to mental illnesses and mental health altogether.
Oh boy, they're loving this. I love this. Love this. Yeah. Joan Pierre's like, I'm speechless with hearing the breakdown. I'm glad you are, Joan Pierre. Not much leaves you speechless. I'm telling you, this is good. Wendy's loving it, as we've been a while since my counseling classes going through this. Wendy's getting refreshed as a counselor and as a teacher. So, why do we need to understand the value system of the brain?
So I think when you say value system, what do you mean?
Um, when I say the value system, let's just say the value of the brain and what it brings to us.
Okay.
Because people don't understand, it sits in our head.
Yes.
And it sits like this, it sits there is it in water, right?
Yes, it's in spinal cerebral
Tell them
fluid.
tell them about that. It's in water. Okay, tell them about that first.
Very fancy water, but it is in water.
Yeah, because when you shake your head,
yes,
and somebody gets like a concussion, people don't understand what happens to the brain. Maybe let's explain that, because then I think they may understand how valuable the brain is. And people just think when they hit their head, it's like hitting their hand. And what's the difference? Where's the brain sitting? It's sitting differently than the rest of the body. Yes.
Well, super interesting, because the brain is so protected. There are 3 layers of protection between the skull and the actual brain. And then it's in water, right? So what that creates is almost like a cushion that if you hit your head in an accident, or you hit your head, in a sporting event, your brain actually has the ability to move safely within a cushioned space before damage really occurs. But that movement can stress and stretch connections and change its function because of that experience, right? So we're not made for our brains to constantly be whiplashing all over the place, right? But it has the capacity to do that and still protect itself to a degree. But damage can take place when that happens. And it can, when it is when the brain is shook, or when it is stressed in some way, it can change the connections of those cells, those brain cells that are working together. It can tear them apart, structural changes, or it can just twist them. So it's still connected, but functionally they might work a little bit different because they're stressed in a way. They're not actually sitting in their optimal connectiveness, right? So brain injuries really occur when we mess with its structure through injury, right? When we mess with its function through chemicals. Now, let me explain that a bit. Our cells are communicating with chemicals, right? They sit in our brain. They communicate by passing chemical signals. Well, chemicals, they release them, and then it passes electrical signals. Let's not get too fancy. The point is that there are chemicals that activate our cells, right? And sometimes what happens in mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, even autism, ADHD, these are all mental health conditions, right? We have lower levels, or schizophrenia, we have lower levels of those chemicals, or maybe heightened levels of those chemicals. And that's like the gas in the system. It makes the car go. So if you don't have enough gas in the car is going to put around until it stops. Or if it has too much, it's going to, kind of mess up the flow of what's happening in the car. And the same thing happens in the brain. When we have chemical imbalances, it affects our behavior and creates some kind of atypicality in the way that the brain functions. That's only chemicals. It also changes in other ways, right?
Right.
Everything could be fine in the brain in terms of the connections between the cells. But sometimes because of our genetics, so we're predisposed to having genes that code for different illnesses or makes us susceptible for certain brain patterns, those can also change our behavior. Those can also change the way we respond to injury and stuff like that. Even when we have too much stress in our life, those hormones, that stress hormone.
Talk about it, Krissy.
Brain, right? At times, there's an optimal period of time where we have that stress hormone that it helps us to be, you're a little bit stressed, so you're more alert. You can act more quickly, you can do better on a test, you can do better on a public speaking kind of event, you can run faster because that stress hormone is waking up your body and making you ready to, attend to what you're doing. But if that stress hormone is in your system, cortisol is there for a long period of time, it starts to shut down brain areas that are supposed to keep you in an equilibrium, right? And that
balanced.
That could become detrimental to the health of your brain. So a lot of things can happen in the brain, whether chemicals kind of get it off, whether it's working optimally or not, whether it's too many chemicals or too little bit of chemicals, whether the connections are turned on and off because of our genetics or injury, or whether stress is involved. All these things can impact the way our brain works.
See, yeah. And I know you're just holding back some of the information because it's so much and it's so juicy. How are you feeling, folks out there? They're feeling a little hype down here. Debbie says, I love how Dr. Krissy's analogy works. Yep, she's sharing it well. And so when we talk about the brain being affected so we know by trauma, so it could be like an accident, it could be through continuous hitting in sports like that. And I really like how you touched on the fact of stress. And stress can change the brain. And we start talking, I guess this is when we start really getting into maybe neuroplasticity of the brain and how the brain can heal and how it can change. And I want to address like some of the stress pieces because people the benefits of negative the challenges or the cons of negative thinking versus positive thinking and why that over time, the same way that people say, well, think negative, think positive, thinking negative all the time can actually change how your brain functions if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. It definitely can, right? Our brains are constantly changing, and they change because they're cells working together. So every behavior, every thought, every emotion, everything that we feel, it's because we have cells that are talking together, right? Once we practice a behavior or practice a thought, whether positive or negative, or have a feeling, those connections that underlie that behavior, that thought is reinforced. And every time we do it, they keep firing together until they lay down a foundation that it's impossible to break. Well, I shouldn't say impossible, but it becomes very difficult to break. It almost becomes hard wires because those cells are now connected. They are absolutely there supporting that behavior in very automatic ways or supporting that thought pattern in very automatic ways. So if you tell yourself enough times, you're not enough, you're going to start believing it because those cells have been wired to keep that as the truth, right?
Right.
And same thing with positive thinking. When we do affirmations, when we have, certain things that we say to ourselves, the more we say something and believe it's the more we are reinforcing those brain connections to say, this is my representation of success in your brain. And every time you give me more energy, I'm going to believe it a little bit more. It's going to get stronger. And that's going to be more automatic to be brought on from time to time. So that's why when we start to, we have to be very aware of the things that we're saying to ourselves and the things that we're thinking and how much we're reinforcing it, because the more we do it, the stronger those connections become, the harder they are there to break. That's why when
Mm,
people start to go to therapy and they start to challenge, irrational thinking, or they start thinking about, questioning if their thinking is the right way, it takes so long to change that, because we're really peeling away the connections of those brain cells to make new
wow.
connections. And that's going to take some time. If you've reinforced that and made it solid through repetition, it's going to be difficult to break that connection. And that's why they say a habit takes 21 days to form or so, because you are reconditioning your brain
Yeah.
cells to fire in different ways once you are changing a behavior or changing a thought pattern or changing a way of looking at life, right? So we have to know that thoughts are real entities in our brains. It's really how brain cells communicate is a thought. And if we break it apart, it's going to take time. When we're building it, it's going to take time. But whatever we reinforce is going to be there to stay for a pretty long time.
I love it. And thank you so much, Krissy, because you're so like making so much sense and you're explaining it in such an easy way. And I remember, and I know you know her very well because you probably studied her, Dr. Carolyn Leaf, talking about it. This was the first time I really started to get the understanding of, how the stems work and the things that form this, like, it's almost like thorns and thistles forming on the stem cells and the dark matter that can happen in the brain, dampening your thoughts. And so I really like that. And I remember, and I think it was Dr. Leaf who said and reminded us now that it's changing for now, from now even to 21 days, because it's so much to really change that thought, that the 30 days really gives you the discipline, and it's better to do it for 60 days straight to really give you a really foundational habit. Like the 21 days gets you, the start, but if you really want to hunker down and change that habit, keeping at it for 60 days and 90 days doing something repetitive will change your lifestyle. So it is so imperative to change how the brain works. Let me see if there are any questions here before we dive in, because I really want to get into the mental health piece a little more. And you have the brain is the OG biocomputer.
Agreed.
And Doc, you were great at explaining how the connections in the brain says, love it. Yes. Okay, you're getting a hello from Barbados.
Hey,
Love
Trish.
me some Dr. Krissy. Love it. Edwina is on here. I needed a refire some things. Time to repeat some affirmations.
That's
Yes, the
right.
affirmations.
Right.
And you know what? The affirmations are so powerful. And we should probably talk about affirmations. Like for you, do you use affirmations?
So I don't have a script that I say over and over, but for me personally, I read the Bible. I
Yeah.
know what the promises are that I want to claim for myself and my family. And those are the things I remind myself of repeatedly, right?
Yes.
And I make sure, even when I'm challenged in my thinking, if I'm going through a particularly stressful time, right? Or if I am, kind of ruminating on something up there and I need to break that habit, I have to remind myself of some of those promises that I stand on. And I
Yeah.
think for me, that really breaks that habit and has me correct my mind in the way I think. I try not to dwell on negative thinking, because again, I
I
understand
can tell.
the more that you reinforce those things, it's the more it's going to become
Yeah.
automatic in your brain, because all you're doing is giving juice to those problem connections, and you don't want to do that. You want to make those connections of positive thinking what is actually foundational in your mind, right?
And
But
as
I
you know, it
completely
takes,
believe in affirmations. It's a
yeah.
very important thing to speak positively, as a way of reinforcing the positive thinking, reinforcing those brain cells, and it becoming automatic thinking after the 90 days, right?
Because you're firing some new stuff into your brain. It's like I think of it. Sometimes I think of it. Like you had some embers in the fire, in that
Yeah.
fireplace, and then when you start adding it, it's like adding more fuel to the fire. So it's like firing up your brain cells again. Yeah, that's how I think about it. And for me, like even taking the word and I've started to even write it down more, and not just taking, but taking those promises and turning it into belief statements and
Right.
saying it so that it becomes a truth. And I think sometimes, we just think we know something until we really start. Can you really walk on this? Can you really walk on that word?
Yeah.
Edwina is saying the next 21 days. So here's a tool. Dr. Carolyn Leaf Edwina, and your sister knows her well. She actually just launched a new book, and she actually has a 21-day program in that book that I am actually starting. So that might really be a great thing. That's a tool for anybody, Dr. Carolyn Leaf.
Yeah.
Um, she's really great. Thoughts are real entities in our brain. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, June is asking, how do you know when you have sunk so low in depression? This is a good question. How do you know when you've sunk so low in depression, and how can you prevent it? Good
Right.
question.
Yeah. You know what? And it's interesting because sometimes individuals don't know that they are as low as they are. It takes the people around them to say, you know what, something's off. What's happening? Like, well, let's talk about this. And I think that's why relationships are important, right? And when sometimes, someone tells you something that you don't want to hear, like you might need help. Like you have to be open to that kind of feedback. But if you find that you've lost motivation, especially with depression, if you've lost motivation to get out of bed, to open the blinds, to think
Right.
positively, to go to work, to cook, to be with your family, that loss of motivation and that sad feeling that's constantly there, that can be an indication that I need help. If you're
Mm,
crying, if you can't get through a typical day of activities, that's a sign that you might need to talk to your doctor. And I want us to understand that, when you have these mental health challenges, it's not always that you're going to be medicated first. Medication is
yes.
great. It helps with those chemical imbalances in the brain because medicine is chemicals. And what it does, it's the fake real thing, right? It's the thing that looks like what the brain
Mhm.
naturally creates and then just gives the brain more to kind of help it get over the hump, right? Or shuts off some processes to help other brain patterns kind of brain processes take over. So medicine is just the fake way of putting chemicals in the brain from what the brain naturally creates. But sometimes all we need to do is change our thinking. It's what you were talking about before, Nicole, the power of the thought. And
Right.
could be done through therapy, through having a licensed therapist, counselor, psychotherapist help you challenge some of the irrational thoughts or some of the fears that you have or some of the things that are creating issues in coping in your everyday life. And when someone helps you to change that thought, again, you're changing your brain patterns, you're changing those brain connections. Thoughts are just brain cells communicating. We gotta figure these are natural physical entities in your brains. A thought might feel abstract. I'm sitting here thinking right now. You're not seeing my thoughts, but it's really just 2, 3, maybe a million brain cells firing to create that. It's a physical thing in our bodies. And that's what therapists help us with, right? They help us to change those things, change our brain, change our thinking to help us become resilient against those issues and circumstances in our lives that sometimes take us to a low point.
And I guess this is why things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, would
Right.
work, because and I see that, I've seen some studies in England, and some of the leaders in the UK that are
Mhm.
really, I know some therapists may not like to hear that. Some doctors, clinicians may not like to hear this, but, and I know it's not for everybody. I know it's not for everybody. And I know that everything takes time. Sometimes you do have to take the medication to get you back stabilized before you can even do something like CBT or talk therapy or anything like that. So, that is such good information to know. And you said something there that just stuck with me. When we think about the depression and the thoughts, and with the question, the stigma comes in.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you think that, because when I think about, the medical community has not really, I think, done the brain justice. I think they have, like, given this valuable organ that is the master behind our mind, the
Yeah.
mastermind,
Yeah.
and not connected mental health to the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sitting here, and I get more upset when I think about it, because I think this could help with the stigma.
Right.
Would you How do you think we can really deal with the stigma when we think about the brain and mental health?
Right. I think. One is understanding what it really is. First, to begin, if you need help, if a loved one needs help, you have to be their advocate, because the same way physical illness has a medical intervention is the same way brain illness. And we've realized that the mind is the brain, right? So brain illness, being mental illness, has an intervention.
Can you say that again? Brain illness being mental.
Yes.
Say that again.
Brain illness has an intervention. Brain illness is the same as a mental illness. Mental illness has its roots in a brain process that went awry.
Right.
So we can fix it the same way we can fix a broken knee, the same way we could fix diabetes or heart conditions. It's the same way we can fix mental illness. It's just a manifestation of the physical brain needing some support. Right. And we have to take away the abstractness of the mind and anchor it in our knowledge that the brain is the physical part that is the mind. Okay. So to take away the stigma, I really believe we have to truly understand that physical illness has a medical intervention. Brain illness has a medical intervention too. And we can, with the right supports, with the right professionals, people can be supported, whether through therapy, whether through medication, whether through a combination of both, and also changes in lifestyles. We're talking about wellness, okay? Nutrition is so very important to brain health. Okay. When the things that we eat is what our body uses to synthesize the chemicals for the brain. So if you're eating the wrong foods, it's going to affect the way that your brain works, because the brain doesn't have the fundamental material to build the chemicals in the right way. So nutrition is very important. Exercising, that is the easiest drug for brain health, because it releases those pleasure chemicals in your brain that activates those pleasure centers, those centers of goal-oriented reward. Those networks are activated when you exercise. And that is such a powerful agent against mental illness and mental challenges, right? These kinds of things are really important when we understand that things within our everyday lifestyle has the power to help our brain stay healthy. We have more of, the equipment that we need to kind of do it before we even need an intervention from a medical team. Right. So nutrition, exercising, natural supplements, these things can create the building blocks for the right chemical composition in the brain to support brain health. And then knowing that if you do feel off, it is not that you're weak. It is not that, you can will that away.
Right.
It's something that needs a doctor. If you broke your arm, you're not going to sit there and say, oh, it will heal itself. Let me just sit here and pamper it a bit. Like, it's not going to happen, right? Don't be afraid to go to the doctor if you feel that something is off, right? And we have to get comfortable with doing that. And we have to get comfortable with supporting our families and loved ones if they seem like they are a little off, or if they're telling you that they're not okay, that you say, I got it. We'll go to the doctor. We'll figure this out, because it's a real thing. The brain just needs a little bit of help.
I love that. And I thank you for saying that, because the stigma is real. The stigma prevents so many people from getting the help that they need, because they think that they're weak. And that was a really big word, that they're weak, that, they can just think it away. And even though your thoughts are part of it, sometimes it's not as easy of you doing it by yourself. It takes help. So go get the help. And I guess when you talked about nutrition, and you talked about exercise, I'm thinking laughter would be a really good medicine. What is the importance like things like laughter and stuff when we think about our brain health and wellness?
Laughter is very important. Finding that's all part of finding balance, right? That activates, we literally have something called the pleasure system in our brain. And it is activated when things that makes us happy, we engage with them. Those lights up that network. It's in the frontal lobe. It's that part that makes us uniquely human, right? It lights up that network. It makes us seek it out more. So think about when you watch a really good comedy, you're like, I'm going to that show the next they come in town. Because your brain makes you seek it out more. It's also the mechanism behind addiction. right? Because when you get pleasure from something, your brain seeks it out more. So whether you do it in a healthy way through laughter, through exercise, through something that you enjoy, if someone does it through how a drug or a substance makes them feel, they can seek it out more. It's the same thing that the brain sees, right? When you're happy, regardless of how you got there, it's the same thing the brain sees, and it makes you want to do it more. So we just have to know that we have to find healthy and safe ways to activate that pleasure center, to bring balance in our lives, to maintain that. And, you know, there could also be unhealthy ways to do that, right?
Yes.
And we just have to be careful with that, because those artificial ways through addiction is also, you know, you get the withdrawal and the sensitization and the dependence that the brain starts to need, because it's actually messing with a very natural process of seeking pleasure.
Thank you for that, Krissy, because the part I want to touch on, just for a lot of people to get it, because even I find people in the medical community, whether you even in hospitals, still today, and even in the government, they say that addiction is not a mental health problem. And I don't get it. And it's not a mental illness. Like, help.
It 100% is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, it 100% is, because it changes the brain. And
Right.
sometimes we are not able to cope with that without medical intervention, right? So which makes it a medical problem.
Exactly.
So if there is a reliance on a drug or a reliance on a substance that's completely changed your brain, that you now have to seek it out just to feel normal. Now, again, your brain is constantly changing by what you feed it. It's going to want more or it's going to want less. And drugs have this ability of literally changing the way that brain cells receive information and send information, to the fact where you will start needing more and more and more just to feel normal, because the brain has become so dependent on external forces, i.e., substances, as opposed to doing it itself, right? And that's where addiction and dependence comes into play in the brain. And when we get to a place where the brain is no longer acting autonomously and is actually dependent on these substances just to feel normal, you're going to need medical intervention.
Yeah.
So it becomes a medical issue.
Thank you so much for saying that. And for anybody who's listening live and on the replay, if you're not sure and anybody tells you that addiction, and if you have a loved one with an addiction problem and it's you need to advocate for them, because sometimes you will find that, and I know it's a big problem, that I know organizations like FAR and they are having, advocating for people with addictions to get the help that they need. And so as I think about it, and as a scientist, because you are a scientist, you are supercalifragilistically-espialidocious scientist, brain imaging, how important now is that to your work and even mental health and wellness in our mind? Because our mind is our brain is our mind. I'm so excited. Our mind, we just need a song. Our mind is our brain is our mind. I don't know. I'm happy.
That's the one thing people walk away with tonight. I am happy.
Yes.
Because you just need to take the mystery out of the mind. It's your brain. It's your brain. Therefore, your brain is physical. We can intervene when we need to. We could also support his health by making healthy choices, right? Doing proper wellness activities, that kind of thing. But brain imaging, how much do I love this? Because I'm a brain imager. This is what I do. This is my science, right? All I do is look at people's brains, right? And, you know, it's amazing. The same way. And what I loved, Nicole, is that you shared this with me earlier. The same way, though, you shared an article that you saw earlier that made me think about this. When we have a broken bone and we go to the doctor and they take an X-ray, what they're doing is they're looking inside the body to see where the issue is so that they know how best to intervene medically. It's the same thing that brain imaging does. When we look at the brain, we look at the structure of the brain. That tells us some, but it doesn't tell us everything, because our brain is alive. It's always working. It's always thinking. It's always doing. So we need to take a look at the brain when the brain is functioning, right? So they can do things like fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or spectroscopy, which is a different way of looking at the brain when it's active. And what we can do is we have profiles from gathering enough of these scans in certain types of conditions, we now have a picture of how a depressed brain looks, or how an anxious brain looks, or how an autistic brain looks. Maybe we're a little bit further, we're a little bit younger in the field for autism, but we're kind of getting there, or how a brain of someone with ADHD looks, right? Or how the brain of someone with schizophrenia look. We have these kinds of reference points that we can then say, okay, this person potentially has schizophrenia because this brain area is not lighting up as much as it needs to when this behavior is happening, or this brain area is lighting up too much that compared to typical activation. So what we pretty much do is we take scans from a typical population. We don't say healthy, we don't say normal, because what is healthy, what is normal, right?
Yeah.
So we take scans from a typical population, and then we take scans from folks who are diagnosed with a particular diagnosis, and we say, how are these different? And it helps us to realize what potentially a brain of someone with schizophrenia looks like, what the brain of someone with anxiety looks like, etc. And the same way, we're not there yet because scans are so expensive. It's so expensive to scan people. It's not the go-to in the medical office. Say we're going to send you to an MRI until they really need to send you for an MRI. But hopefully we get to the point where the same way we have an X-ray to diagnose a broken bone, to know how to intervene at the right way, is the same way we can have a brain scan to diagnose a mental health condition or a brain disorder, to know how to intervene. Now, we are years, maybe decades away from this, but some really cutting edge groups are doing this. And a lot of researchers are trying to figure out, how do we understand the brain patterns in particular diagnostic groups, so that we can better meet their needs more specifically than just saying, oh, they have this diagnosis, and assuming that the treatment that works for that other person with this diagnosis will work for you, when you're a completely different person. We don't know, right? No two people, they say, and I'm an autism researcher, no two people with autism are the same. Right? So you really have to treat the person. Right? So hopefully we get to the place where we can use brain scans to help diagnose and guide treatment. And I know that science is trying to get there. We're not there yet, but we're trying to get there.
Well, I'm thinking if anybody's live and on the replay and you are connected to the government, you need to share this. You need to contact Dr. Krissy and her team, and all the teams that are really working on brain health, because this is so important. When I think about this pandemic, Krissy, and I think of the vicarious trauma just to even start, and I'm going to try not to cry, when I think of the doctors and the nurses and the people on the front line, and what, to me, isn't that trauma happening to their brain and their mind every day? Are people talk to me about this?
100%. I think that mental health is going to be such an issue coming out of this pandemic. It's going to, the government's going to have to give money for proper programming to support the mental health of our frontline workers, to support the mental health even of just our community. I was looking at some stats, and I kind of mentioned this to you, Stats Canada came out with a thing, and I'm just going to read it here. It says, since COVID-19, 68% of Canadians report no longer having very good mental health. Wow. That is almost 7 in 10 people, just the general public. We're not even talking about frontline workers, just the general public are no longer thinking of themselves as having good mental health. So this pandemic, and it shows you that how situations in our lives, highly charged emotional situations, have a way of impacting our brains the hardest. And the reason it does that is because, if we believe in evolution and survival of the fittest, if things are threatening your life, you want to stay away from it to protect the propagation of your genes, right? That kind of thing. So these kind of emotionally charged events make you fearful. It sends you in, fight and flight mode to kind of protect yourself. And I think the community has been terribly impacted by this. 7 in 10 people, come on, we're all kind of suffering here. And
somebody in your household is affected by it.
someone
Somebody in your household.
exactly. And frontline staff, they see it day in and day out. So I strongly believe that coming out of this pandemic, our frontline workers, they're going to have to get the right mental health support to kind of cope with the reality that they had to face for over a year at this point.
It brings me to this point. Joan Pierre just asked a question, which is what I was thinking of Sojourner in my head. With all this information in the medical community, why can't they all speak about mental illness as an illness and connecting it to the brain? Like,
Yeah.
I'm flabbergasted that they're not making this connection. And I don't know if the government makes this connection. What challenges do you find as a scientist, a mastermind teacher of the brain and how it works, and knowing the connection to mental? What challenges are you facing, even just trying to do you find you have challenges convincing your colleagues or other clinicians about this?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it. I think we've come a ways. We're getting better, but we're not there yet. So we're moving in the right direction. As you mentioned in the intro, right? Like, I am teaching into right now the first of its kind, a program, the first of its kind in Ontario for mental health and disability management. So the government is dedicating some money to educating healthcare professionals. What I teach into is a graduate level certificate program. So we have community workers, we have healthcare providers who are students of mine, and we talk about this. We talk about mental health and disabilities management. We talk about supporting the community, how to be more sensitive to it, how to support not only people who are diagnosed with mental health and disability, but we talk about supporting their families too, because caregivers even consider, even experience a substantial stress just from caring for someone who has a disability. So I think that there is movement in the right direction of the government giving money for programs such as these, and also supports to different organizations, whether it's, the Canadian Association for Mental Health or other, similar programs. But I think we have to become advocates for this. We have to self-advocate. We have to advocate for our loved ones. And we have to force people to see that your mind is just your brain. And the same way we can fix other organs in the body is the same way we can fix the brain with the right supports. I think when we get around that thought, I think a lot more energy will be put behind this.
What would be so if you were talking to the premiers all over Canada, all the premiers, we were in one room, we're having a conversation, we got all the senators, and we got the prime minister and their staff. What message do we want them to get? What was some of the messages that we need them to get tonight about investing in brain health, in understanding the brain, in supporting mental health and wellness?
Right. First, I think, one, we have to invest in our youth. We have a big mental health. Our biggest suicide rates are in young people. Our biggest addiction rates are in young people, that 25 and under. Those are the years between 14 and 25 are the years that people experience the most burden from mental health, whether it's financial burden, emotional burden, relational burden from their relationships with their families. So we've got to work on really creating resilience in young people. We have to be proactive. We can't be reactive. We can't just fix when we're sick. We have to create wellness programming. We have to support mental health and wellness from the onset. I think focusing on youth is a very, very important thing, giving money towards programs that focus in youth. The next thing, supporting not only people who have diagnoses and people who are feeling low, but supporting caregivers. We underestimate the stress and the strain that caregivers are under when they're supporting someone with a disability. And we lose a lot of those folks to depression, to anxiety, to chronic stress. And then it's like a snowball effect, because then they too begin to have physical ailments, because the brain is physical, it's connected to physical being. The rest of the body is going to get affected sooner or later.
Anxiety, the stress. Come on, I'm listening.
Right?
I'm the prime minister listening to you right now, and I'm going to take notes.
So I think these are the two big pockets, right? We are right now doing an okay job where people when they have a mental health illness and they are ready to be diagnosed, we can care for them because they have said that they have that. But the folks who are not accessing care, we need to target them. It's the young people and it's the caregivers. In my opinion, those are the two big groups. And then we just need to make sure that people take away the stigma away from asking for help when you don't feel okay. We're not saying that you need a prescription. We're not saying that you need therapy. It might be as small as talking to a friend and saying, I don't feel okay. Let's just talk. Just the act of releasing that negative energy gets it out of your body. And that might be all you need. Exercising is another way of releasing that negative energy, get it out of your body. You know what a cortisol cry is? A very emotional cry. So cortisol is that stress hormone. Right. And there's a new thing that we call a cortisol cry. When you're super stressed out and you cry that emotional cry, do you know that in those tears are cortisol and other toxins that your body is releasing?
Wow.
That's why you must never tell someone, stop crying, let them cry. Your body is helping them release those toxins that are poisoning their system, right? So these are things that we can do. Let's look at the youth. Let's look at caregivers. Let's create more supports around destigmatizing mental health. And then we're on our way. We're going to have more work to do, but that's a good place to start.
That is a phenomenal place to start. And I was actually having that conversation when I was talking to a group at Stella's place today, and we were talking about, caregivers. And one of the things, there are two things I really feel that need to happen. And for anybody listening from the government right now and insurance companies, actually three things. As soon as you have a loved one in particular, we find supports for people and empathy for people with cancer, with heart attacks and stuff.
Yes.
But in particular, is if you have caregivers for anyone with a disability, they should have immediate free FREEEE access to counseling to manage their mental health and wellness. Because right now if a family member, a caregiver, they have to find a way to get counseling. And the free counseling, I'm sorry that some of this being offered, you're getting a different person all the time. Mm-hmm. So yes, some programs have been created through the pandemic, but those free programs, you sometimes you need some consistency. Sometimes you don't want to talk to the same person all the time. I get it. But sometimes we need to invest in this other piece. The other piece I see that we need to up the cost. In insurance policies, I know some more insurance companies are adding mental health as, in their benefit package, but the amounts are so small, like $300 that's what, 2 visits to the therapist? Like, seriously? I just really wonder. I just don't get it. I just don't get it, Krissy. I just don't get it. And I'll leave the third one for now. I'm looking at a comment here. I'm trying to be good today because I'm passionate about this. How about a brain with dementia looks? I find memory loss to be one of the biggest fears as we age. Memory loss is huge. So tell us about this memory loss and the beautiful brain that weighs 3 pounds.
That's a great question. And dementia is actually genetic. So there is a genetic coding component to that if it runs in the family, someone could be susceptible to it. Doesn't mean that they're going, your family member is going to develop dementia. It just means they're more susceptible for it because genes code for things. But interestingly enough, how we interact with our environment and aka our lifestyle, can protect against that because we're also changing the brain through our behaviors. So in dementia, to be protective in that way, it's important that you have good wellness practices. It's important that you're constantly exercising your brain, trying to learn new things, trying to do things differently. So you're keeping those brain cells firing as long as they can and creating new connections so that they don't begin to rely on the genetic coding, but they're creating their own coding through the repetitive use or the reinforcement of different behaviors and actions that you're doing. But what happens in dementia is that there are plaques and tangles that present themselves in the brain. And what that does is it makes the cells, instead of it having space, the cells having space to communicate effectively, it makes them all stick together, and it really kind of confuses the connection to the point where they become unfunctional, like they're no longer functioning. And the brain has a way of protecting itself that it will kill off these cells and send them away. And that's how we keep losing brain cells, and brains keep deteriorating when we talk about dementia. It really does progress in a very typical way. So you kind of know what kind of behaviors or symptoms that you see manifest first, and then it kind of goes and goes and goes until it kind of affects the entire brain. But it's really those plaques and tangles that begin to, instead of the cells communicating in a nice organized way, it makes them all sticky and twisted, and then they no longer are working as they should, so the brain gets rid of them, right? And they go away. And the more these brain cells kind of filter away, is the more it starts to propagate through the whole brain. Why we start losing memory first is because the plaques and tangles present themselves in the area close to the brain where we make memories, the hippocampus. So that's why we lose the memory first, then cognitive, degeneration comes about, and then we kind of lose much of ourselves. It's a really interesting, very interesting brain disorder. But if it runs in your family, there are things that you can do to protect yourself. And those are wellness choices, right?
I love that. And as I'm thinking about it, and I think about this time again, as we go back to the pandemic, stress, how stress impacts the memory. Like when you're going, that tells me too that stress impacts your memory and what you should do. Like when you find you're not dealing with, the fact of it's just that you're just having temporary memory losses, you can't keep up. What should we be doing to enhance our brain and recognize that, what, our brain is under stress? What are some of the things we can probably do? Because I know we can't do everything, but what are some of the things we could probably do?
It's really good that you bring that up, Nicole, because it's a good distinction to make. There are some dementias that are irreversible. That's the genetic type ones where it's true dementia, right? And there are some dementias that are reversible, like those that come about when you're stressed out, or you have depression, or you have anxiety, when you have other mental health challenges that are impacting the memory network in the brain, that can bring about temporary memory loss. And once you fix the depression, the anxiety, the stress, your memory comes back. So it's about finding balance in terms of those reversible dementia kind of moments of forgetfulness and such like that. Don't think it's the real thing unless you're diagnosed with the real thing. But if you feel stressed out and you're starting to have memory problems, deal with the stress. Figure out what those triggers are. Figure out a new way of addressing them.
Right.
Exercise, eat well, see your doctor, see if you can have an intervention that first focuses on behavioral changes before you need the medication, or go to the medication if that's the right decision for you. But once you deal with the mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, stress, those kinds of things, and gets that under wrap, the memories will come right back.
I love it. And you talk about nutrition a couple times and supplements. What are some good supplements for the brain and for our brain health in particular?
Well, interestingly, I love everything natural. I like you to eat well, right?
Yes.
I can't really tell you supplements, but I could tell you, of course, there are some, you could always supplement anything. Omega-3s are excellent. Your brain needs that, right? Other berries, leafy greens, those kinds of things, nuts. These are the kinds of foods that really help you with that cognitive processing. It gives the body the building blocks to which they can then create the right chemicals to help the brain work as it should. So, any nutritionist will probably be better at this than I am in saying these things. I think the fundamentals are omega-3, as you know, leafy greens, nuts, that kind of thing, berries, all those things are really good for the body and really good for the brain.
I remember, I don't know how true it is. I remember somebody saying the brain reminds them of a walnut. Walnuts are good for the brain because it's because it's like the walnut. I just want to touch on something quick here. I don't know if it's quick, but Suicide. I find people like to say that suicide is a selfish act. Why is suicide not a selfish
Let's
act?
please not say that.
I know. But so many,
Not
'cause,
that.
we mentioned about suicide just now, but so many people are not understanding that suicide is not a selfish act.
No, no, it's not a selfish. Some people get to the point where they are so overwhelmed, and we have to realize that this is a brain thing, right? They are so overwhelmed that they cannot talk their brain into thinking, in an advantageous way for them. They need to have that external help to kind of say, you're worth it. What you're dealing with is manageable. We can support you in getting the help that you need. If someone tells you that they are experiencing suicidal thoughts or you see self-harm behavior, you have to say, you know what, this is what I'm seeing in you. I see that you're, cutting yourself, or I hear that you are saying these words. Say it back to them. It's almost like you're going to be their mirror to reflect as to what you were seeing and what you were hearing, right? And you say this and you say, you know what, sometimes when people do these things, they may be thinking about suicide. And then you
Mhm.
ask them, are you thinking about suicide? And you say that word. Do not put the stigma on that word that you are
Yeah.
afraid to say it. You say it because that could be life or death for that person. They have to know that you feel comfortable enough to be to say that word and to get them supports. And if they say yes, you say, I'm going to get you the support that you need. And there are crisis lines that you can 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week, crisis lines that you can call with the person if they want you to, or give that person the number so that they can call and be guided through, a safety plan with the right kind of professionals. But we also need to remove the stigma from depression. Sorry, not from depression, from suicide. And we have to be willing to, say the word and to support people and to say what you see.
Mhm.
That would allow the person to feel seen, to feel heard, and to know that this person isn't afraid to, help me deal with this super heavy load. If you see someone trying to lift a car, are you going to leave them there? Or
Come
are you
on
going to
now.
help them? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we
Yeah.
have to not be afraid to give people help when we see that they're trying to manage too much.
I love that. If you see someone needing help lifting a car, wouldn't you go help them? And
Yeah,
so why
yeah.
wouldn't you see to help someone in distress?
And can
I
I
love
just,
it.
one more thing? You
Go
don't tell
ahead.
them how to lift the car because, they're trying to lift a car. You help
Yes.
them, right? It's not your job to tell them how to fix the problem in a place when people are in crisis. You just get them the supports that they need so that we make sure that they're safe and that when they're in a better mental headspace, we can then help them with the right people, right professionals, coach them through a
Mhm.
plan to face the life challenges that they're living with.
I love it. Thank you, Chrissy. And I put those resources. Chrissy sent me some resources and I put those resources. The links are in the chat. Share, share, share. Now this is coming down. I'm trying to be cognizant of time because Chrissy's a mom and she's teaching in the morning and she still has, school for her son, her children. Who is Cressy Thomas?
Oh, that's my husband. Is he online? I have to
Well,
check
guess what he just said. I wonder if Chrissy looks at her partner and wonders if I wish I could scan and fix your
all
brain.
the time. But that's just because he's so wonderful.
I just had to throw that in there. That was so cute.
I
That was
appreciate
so
that,
cute.
Nicole. That was great.
Yeah, I just had to put that in there. The comments are coming in, the questions are coming in, and I love it. So, Chrissy, one message, and when we think about the Black community in particular, the BIPOC community in particular, people of color, the Indigenous community,
Yeah.
and the stigmas with mental health, what is a message that you would want to share with them so that they can just start shifting their thinking, even having those conversations at home?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I don't know if back in the day, because I'm aging myself here, they don't even say cancer, they say the C word. They have this, we don't even talk about it. I have relatives that will say that they have it, and I'm like, seriously?
Mm,
And I don't think people realize that even just with our mental health, our brain health, that if you do not tell it, somebody doesn't even know what the genetics are in your family. I think I'm asking two questions
yeah.
because I'm having a conversation with myself and I'm forgetting that you're in the room because I'm thinking about genetics. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
hereditary things. but we in the Black community are not
Mhm.
having the discussions. Talk to the BIPOC community,
I
as
know.
we say.
I think I honestly, and that's why I want to thank you, Nicole, because I think we need more of these. We need more people talking about mental health that look like us, you know? We need more people to see that it's a real thing within our, being human makes it real, right? I think, our white brothers and sisters are a lot more open talking about this. They are more comfortable getting medical support. But there is a stigma in minority cultures, right, here in Canada, where it's seen as a weakness. It's seen as
Yes.
something you can will away. And I think these kinds of conversations are important. We are now advocates. Everyone in this live, consider yourself a mental health advocate moving forward. And don't
Yes.
shy away from that mental health conversation. Don't shy away from asking someone if they're okay, right? And if they're not okay, then figure out, Google some resources for them, or text Nicole or message me and I'll send you some.
Yes.
We have to be advocates for our brothers and sisters, for our parents, for our loved ones, for everyone within our community. We can't see mental health as a weakness. Mental health is just your brain doing something a little crazy. And we are going to help your brain with the right supports, whether it is medical intervention, whether it's just a friend, carrying on a conversation with you, say, let's talk. It's about releasing that energy, taking it out of your body, putting it into the space so the person no longer feels like they're carrying the burden alone. And if it gets to the place where they truly need the intervention of a doctor, be that support for them. Go there with them,
Yes.
call them, see how they're doing. I actually had the situation the other day. We're coming on to the end of this winter semester, right? And I had one of my students kind of email me and say, you know what, I'm having a little bit of a moment. I can't do this right now. And she was so open to say, I'm having suicidal thoughts. I am self-care. I'm self-harming. And I was like thinking to myself, I gave her the support that she needed and made sure that she had her care plan. But I was thinking to myself, I have never gotten an email like that from a Black student or a
Wow.
colored student or a minority student. There is something about within our cultural group that we still shy away from asking for help when we need that help. And we just have to keep having conversations like this. We just have to keep becoming advocates and make our friends advocates.
Yes.
After the conversation, you go talk to someone else who looks like you about this. And hopefully they pick up on your positive energy, that it's just the brain needing help, right? And then hopefully they kind of perpetuate that within their own friend circles. And then we get to the point where it's no longer a taboo topic.
Thank you for that, Krissy. And you spoke about your student, and what I listen to parents right now, and and young people. There are some are going into high school, some are in university, and there's this pressure that teachers
Mhm.
and parents are still putting on them in a crisis, in a pandemic. What is a word that you would have for them to just take the pressure off, for crying out, chrysanthemums?
Just
Sorry.
do it. Just do it. We have to roll with the punches. We are living in a very different world right now. Like, our entire world is dealing with a pandemic. No country is untouched. We have to put our lives into perspective and say, how important is my mental health? Is the mental health of my children? Is the mental health of my spouse? How important is that in pushing academically or pushing business when the entire world is coping with something that's killing people in the thousands and the tens of thousands every day, right? We just have to gain some perspective. The government knows that our kids are not going to bring in the marks during a pandemic as they are in a non-pandemic year,
Yes.
right? That. That's why they're not having EQAO testing for the past 2 years. They didn't have it last year. They're not going to have it this year again. So the government knows that we have to adjust. Our teachers know when we have parent-teacher meetings, they know that kids are under stress when they're doing virtual school and stuff like that. We just have to be okay with being human. We are not bionic. We are not supernatural. We cannot cope with everything. We have to give ourselves space to just handle life as it comes. Know when you've had enough and say, I need a mental health break. And know when you have enough energy to push, and just be sensitive and kind to yourself.
I love that. Know when to take the mental health break. And it's okay to have a sleep one day. It's okay to sleep in one day. Employers, I think employers have to do the same thing, giving themselves, the opportunity. I've heard people said that doing virtual work, they're actually online even more and they're
Yes,
working even harder than if they were at work because there's this pressure that you have to be online all the time. Like you have to be there ready to answer everybody's email. We need to give ourselves some grace. We need to give ourselves permission to have some self compassion. Are there any books you could recommend? If I put some other resources in the chat, folks. I put something for youth, which is Stella's Place. I've put the CAMH Family Resource Center. If you
that's
go to the
great.
CAMH Family Resource Center, they have a list of organizations that you can contact. In fact, CAMH actually just released the Hope app, and
Yeah,
it's an app regarding suicide prevention.
yeah,
And anybody can put it on their phone, and there's a plan, and there's resources there for families. So the Hope app is there from
yeah.
CAMH. Um, but as we think about it, are there any books or resources that you may want to recommend for whether it's adult or parents or even young ones that they could read about just being well?
Yeah, yeah. Those are some great resources that you just listed, Nicole. And I think that's a good place people to start because nobody has time to read books nowadays. I think you know what it's so interesting because I think, and I consider myself part of the older generation. I'm going to be 40 next week. Thank you very much.
Woo! We're partying, cake
I
time.
of my life. No, but I love books, right? But I think folks that are younger than us, they just don't have the patience to read through books.
Yeah.
And I think the resources that you just listed are phenomenal. They're trusted agencies that are releasing good information that's digestible. Take
Mhm.
advantage of that. I think that's wonderful. Someone that I also, as you mentioned already, Dr. Carolyn Leaf, she
Love
is
her.
a phenomenal neuroscientist who does work on thinking, the power of the thought. I think that she is phenomenal, and her work is sound from what I see. Of course, she's more seasoned in this field than I am, but she's definitely a sound teacher. I think her work is phenomenal. I think she's probably a good author. And I mean, there are tons of different
Yes.
self-help books, but they don't all focus on a neuroscientist telling you how the brain works. So I would say capitalizing those resources that you just mentioned. Go check out Caroline Lee's books and just kind of stay on top of what the government's doing for mental health supports.
Yeah, well, we're hoping they're going to be calling Dr. Krissy Doyle on Mohawk College and all the work that you guys are doing and funding brain scans. So
Yeah.
it should be a norm that we're doing the brain work and the brain work with all the different hospitals and getting the education out there. So let's get into some fun stuff as we wind down here. And let me ask you some fun questions. Well, it may not be fun, but I'm just going to inquire some more about you. What does victory look like for you in your life? Because this is a Victory Speak show, so I got to know what victory means to you, Krissy.
Yeah. For me, I think victory means wholeness. I think in terms of knowing that I have lived a life that I am proud of, I've made the right decisions. I have helped my kids to live a full life where they are happy and they are the best versions of themselves and they are pushing, as hard as they can towards their dreams, whatever that might be, where my husband feels supported, where the people who are connected with me feels loved and appreciated and seen when they're with me. That's what victory looks like to me, because I think it's about the people connection. And when, my mom's always talking about when she leaves this earth, that has rubbed off of me. But when I leave this earth, people aren't going to remember my degrees. They're not going to remember my accomplishments. They're going to remember how I made them feel and what I enabled in their life. So things like this, where I can help in talking from what I know to help a family, to help an individual, that's important to me, right? Because you're leaving hopefully with some kind of nugget of truth today that will make your life a little bit more informed or a little bit better in some way, right? Or if my son leaves and he feels that hug and kiss from mommy was just hit the spot, that's all I need. Right? So victory for me is making sure that people within my sphere feel seen, feel heard, feel that I have supported them in some way. And I just love that. That's my cousin. She's a phenomenal doctor in the States, Canadian, but in the States. You need to talk to her. Anyways.
Okay. Connecting after.
Thank you, Sam. But that's what victory looks like to me.
Awesome. So now that you're going to be turning the big 4-0, and you're going to be even more bold and brass and coming out there, and your sister says happy pre-birthday. If
Thank
I could sing,
you.
I would sing to you, but I can't. What would you say to your 20-year-old self, Krissy?
Things will get better.
Yay!
I think, when I was 20, I was finishing my first degree, I think. And you have different focus, you have different goals, it's the push to be great, which is a good push, right? It's the push to be competitive. And sometimes you lose yourself a little bit. I didn't lose myself because I'm still here. But you do feel the pressure to show up in ways that, it could sometimes take a toll on your mental health. And I would hope that young people, educating themselves to go through to establish careers and stuff, they would know that just keep your eyes on yourself for a second and make sure you're doing it in a healthy way. Don't push to the point where you're sacrificing yourself. And I think that that's a really important thing as we kind of grow up. And I see more millennials being willing to do that, right? Where they're like, I don't want to, go outside of my extreme. So I think in a matter, just don't lose yourself in the process of growing up and becoming a person. Just make sure that you stay connected to who you are, stay connected to wellness activities, stay connected to a circle of supporters and loved ones that you can be with throughout your life, and then you will be okay. You will be just fine, and keep doing what you love.
When I grow up, I want to be as wise as Dr. Krissy. I'm just saying, I'm gonna put a picture of Dr. Krissy on my wall, and
Nicole.
Dr. Carolyn Leaf. Now there's Dr. Krissy. Hey, just saying. What's next for you, Doctor?
Well, after this, I'm going to put the kids to sleep. I know that's not what you were talking about. I'm just going to throw that in there. You know what? I think I have been, this mental health thing has been really weighing heavily on my heart, especially through this pandemic. And I really want to thank you, Nicole, for this opportunity because, I see it every day in the news. I see it on social media, like I'm on Instagram, and I see it coming through my feed constantly. I see how people are feeling, and I want, especially from our community, and I want to make sure that, we don't get buried by what's happening within the world right now. So I thank you for this opportunity to talk about it, to debunk some of the stigma, to create advocates of all of us.
Yes.
And hopefully when we are talking about the issues of the world, we're also very sensitive to how we can be a support for someone who's living that issue, whether we all are, our loved ones are, our support circles are. So if I can do more of these things where I help to bring light to mental health and how it affects the brain, and that it is a physical illness, it is not an illness of the mind, that's some abstract thought, it's a physical illness. We can get more support from everybody, right? To get people the help they need in a timely way and a way that would potentially save their lives.
Dr. Krissy. This is what I know by the comments. This is what people are doing out there right now. They're like, yay, Dr. Krissy, yeah, we love you. By the comments, yay. Like Joan is like, love you. Oh, and Jillian says, she's funny too. Yes, she is. She's got a great sense of humor. Shirley says, thank you, such wise advice and great conversation tonight. Thank you. Everyone who tuned in live and on the replay, we thank you. We're so happy that you were here. And as we wind down, Dr. Krissy, before I close out with my closing remarks, any last words, anything else, anything that comes to mind that you want to say that before I start closing out?
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I just want everyone to know you are great. You are seen. You are important. We all need to be part of this, movement to make mental health more of a talking topic, a conversation topic in our lives. And I hope that you walk away with something that you can take into your own personal conversations from this live, and that you could become an advocate for yourself and for someone else. We could do this. We can survive this pandemic. We can survive anything. All right. We've got this together. And I really appreciate everybody coming out today. Nicole, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, I am super happy. And before I close out, I just got to let you see this comment. Very proud. I don't get to hear Krissy speak often. Real amazing. You're gonna
Oh,
make her cry. Well, I know you're gonna be doing something really good for her birthday. Wait, oh, there's a question. Wait a second. Dr. Krissy, what are you using on your skin? Dang, your face is pure gold. You're glowing. You're glowing, Dr.
water, lemon water.
Lemon water, people.
I just washed my face. This is makeup
Get
though.
get your lemon today. Get
Thank you,
your
Shirley.
lemons
Thank you,
today. Grow a lemon tree outside in the spring winter day. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. It has been indeed a pleasure having Dr. Krissy here with us tonight. I hope you learned a lot, and you can follow her on Instagram, but the Instagram's private. So if you want to know more about Dr. Krissy, well, DM me. I'll share. To my listeners live and on the replay, thank you for taking the time, for tuning in. Thank you for entering this special place that we prepared for you today. There's going to be many more conversations about the mind and the brain. As you know, this series is Minding Our Mind, MIND. I encourage you to stay in a victory mindset so that you will be in victorious in your wellness, in this revolution for yourself. Today, we enjoyed 3 seasons in one day, as I said earlier. And what is this day seeing to you? Could you see the beauty in it? I saw such amazing beauty in it. This day has been made just for you. Just for you. Think about that. You're breathing here, you're in this space. Can you embrace the spring and winter moments in your life? And sometimes it may just come in one day, but just like the snow came today, it disappeared within hours and it was spring again. We felt spring like again. We saw the birds coming out and then know that sometimes the moments may look a little dark, may look a little fuzzy, but you need to activate the embers, the fires in your brain and fire it up. Change your thinking, get the help that you need, talk to somebody, and know that your mind is your brain and your brain is your mind. There is so much that is happening. I want you to remember there is still life in you. The fact that you're here, bloom where you're planted, even when sometimes the snow comes on you. You would see on my Facebook today and on my Instagram today, I got some beautiful pictures. Joan Pierre was one of my photographers. Love Moore was one of my photographers. And they were showing me the snow just sitting on the trees and on the branches, but yet the blooms were still there. And guess what? As the sun came up and rose and shone on it, they were privy to all of us to see. So don't despair. It's April. Things are going to get better. See today, this unique day, April 21st, 2021, as a time to reset. Utilize the moment. Tomorrow, it's Earth Day. Who knows what tomorrow is going to bring? Sailor, pause, think, and seize the moment. Carpe diem, seize the day. Speak victory over your life. Speak victory over the lives of your loved ones. Remember, life and death is in the power of the tongue. And so speak life. Now, on Saturday, I'm going to be part of a wellness conference, the Revolution Wellness Conference by the Congress of Black Women. And I want you to tune in, and it's free. Welcome to the Wellness Revolution. And so Saturday, you can check me out there. I'll put the link in the comments, but go to the Congress. Dr. Nakisa Remy is going to be there, and she's going to be talking about minding your posture. That's part of your well being. Winsome Duar is going to be there about eating to boost your immunity. And Dr. Krissy talked to us about tonight about eating right. And now we're going to have Debbie King is going to be talking about the personal workout. And we're going to end with a Zumba after party at the Wellness Revolution Conference. So check it out. Be intentional. Have a vision for your wellness. Have a vision for your family's wellness. Cultivate it so you can be transformed. Celebrate yourself along the way, and together we will be restored. And in order for us to be victorious in this process, we got to yield, we got to humble ourselves. Beloved, my friends, thank you for joining me live and on the replay. Victory is your portion. I am Nicole Waldron. your voice of victory and mental fitness coach. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Victory Speak 7, and on YouTube. You have all the shows. I'll post this up there as well. And it's also going to be on the Facebook page of Victory Speak 77. And I look forward to talking with you more, tuning on Wednesdays where we talk about wellness, minding our minds. And on Mondays, we have inspiring conversations. Next week, Monday, I am going to have the beautiful Brenda Foreman here with me, African Fashion Week, and she just got a promotion from her country. So we're going to talk about that. Remember, love is in the details. Be intentional with your love today. Thank you for tuning in. We are happy that you are here with us tonight. This is Nicole and Krissy saying good night. God bless. Take care and see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.